167 days in space, over 38 hours performing spacewalks, traveling more than 6 million miles, making hundreds of orbits about the Earth. But how did I get there? This is the making of an ordinary spaceman. I'm Clayton C. Anderson, and these are my stories.
Throttle back to 67% of rated performance, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier.
My life partner, Susan Anderson, is a special woman. Join us on another episode of The Making of an Ordinary Spaceman and find out why I'm deeply in love.
When we took our break, we were talking about Columbia and the aftermath for us as a couple and as a family. So what I remember from that day, being a family escort at the Cape, when we had loaded all the families from the shuttle landing facility back into our Suburbans, and we had prepped to drive back to crew quarters. I had Lonnie McCool. I had Doug Anderson, Dave's brother. Lonnie was Willie's wife.
Brown.
Or Doug Brown. What did I say?
Anderson.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. There was an Anderson family on board.
That's true. And then I had JP. That was Casey Chavla's husband. Mm-hmm. And so as we pulled all these people together to get them into our Suburban, not knowing what was going on, the first thing I did was reach to the radio and turn it off. And I don't know why I did that. It was a gut feel, but I guess I figured that anything on the radio would be ahead of what we were going to hear. And so, thinking that it was not good, I didn't want the radio to be on for the families.
Sure.
And Doug Brown, I remember before the car started, we had to wait for the FBI guys to get in their car. We had to wait for everybody to fire up, so we had our big caravan. And Doug kept saying, Dave told me about this. Dave said something bad could go wrong. It could be a tragedy. And I'm thinking, hey, Doug, stop. And I told him, be quiet. We don't know anything, and we won't know anything for a while. So just let's keep each other within our own thoughts for a while until we get back and learn more.
And that had to have been hard for the families because, Doug was alone, single, adult, and you had children in the car as well.
I didn't have any children with me at that time.
Just adult family members.
Yeah, they had broken it up pretty big, so I just had Doug, JP, and
Lonnie. Okay.
Yeah, and Doug was very talkative. Doug was right. His emotional reaction to the whole thing, and I think they all knew, but his emotional reaction was to chatter. Whereas Lonnie and JP, their emotional reaction was to turn inside.
Well, and they're both a little more introverted people as it is.
Absolutely.
Lonnie, having been a military spouse, excuse me, had probably a lot more on her mind of what was happening and what was about to happen. And JP may not have been prepared as a civilian as to what to expect. I can't even imagine what they were going through.
And that's one of the hardest parts of being family escort, because you don't know. It's hard to know that much, or the depth of those family relationships and those things. So I was learning them on the fly. So we drive back. We're at crew quarters. The families are seated in that big room you might remember from when you visited, that has that huge table. It's got memorabilia on top of the
meeting
table.
room, and weren't there some simulators and so forth on the walls and so forth?
You can fly the shuttle, and you can fly the robotic arm.
Sure, that's where everybody had their meetings and so forth.
Yeah, so they're all those families are sitting around with the spouses and the kids, all around that table, and they don't have anything to do. Right, the kids are freaking out. The young kids, they're kids. And so we had some people, the staff at crew quarters was trying to get the kids to the TV and the video game, but we didn't have much of that available. The adults were quietly talking, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So me and my role as escort, I decided I needed to know more information. So I walked all the way down the hall to where Jerry Ross, the astronaut who runs crew quarters, or ran crew quarters at the time, was talking to Bob Cabana, who was the other astronaut, who was the head of all astronaut things at JSC at the time. And as I walked in there, I heard Cabana say, "There is no hope. We have to tell them there is no hope." And that's when my gut, I felt like I was going to vomit. And I didn't say anything to him. I just stood there for a second, and then Jerry said, we need to go tell him now. And so I went. They said, "Clay, get everybody in the conference room." And so I made sure everybody was there, and Cabana came down, and he's a Marine, and in perfect Marine, what I would imagine is Marine behavior, he stood with his feet together, his arms straight at his side, and he said, "There's no hope." And my God,
my word.
And when I heard that, the next thing that came were the screams from the kids and the crying and the sobbing, and I'm just standing there going, "Oh man, what what am I involved in?" And I didn't really know what to do. They can make you a family escort. They can put a document in front of you and say, "Read this. It tells you everything." It doesn't. So the first thing I did was I quietly exited the room, and the doors were open, and I hid behind the door, and I called you just to say, "I'm okay, but I won't be able to talk to you for a while."
Yeah, and we knew that. I mean, just already by watching television, you knew things were going to be bad, so I expected that call.
Well, and then I hung up with you, and then I called Mom, and I told Mom the same thing, that I'm okay, but Susan, talk to Susan, make sure you keep abreast of what's going on, because I can't talk for a while. And then was the hardest part, I think, for me of the whole deal, was when the kids came out of the room to go supposedly down and play video games. Matthew, husband, who was, I think, 6 or 7, Cole's age at the time.
He was a little bit older than Cole, but yeah, about 7 or so.
He was grabbing his mom's leg, and he says, "Mom, I want to go back to this hotel. I want to swim in the pool. I want to swim in the pool." That was his way to cope. And what we had done in the astronaut emergency plan was we had separated all of the extended family, the grandmas, the grandpas, the aunts and uncles, the brothers. We put all those people in another building,
right,
about a half a mile away, and they're all sitting there. I'm imagining they're sitting there freaking out, and they can't do anything. They can't help anyone.
Right.
And here are these little kids who need that support, right? They need Grandpa to take them back to the pool and swim for a while, so that the mom doesn't have to deal with that piece of it, right? And then Laura, husband, she's about, what, I don't know, 10?
Yeah, she probably was.
10 or 11, and she says, "Mom, who's going to walk me down the aisle?"
That was her first thought.
Yeah. So I'm hearing this, and, and they're they're a full faith-based family, right?
Absolutely, so, even to this day.
And Laura was like, her mom was a rock, Evelyn was a rock. And then I went into a hallway that leads to the medical room where astronauts get physicals and stuff there. And on the wall of the hallway are all pictures of crews, right? The various missions of the shuttle over the years.
Those are still there.
And, of course, the one that's the most prominent is the crew that's launching, or was supposed to launch and come home, STS-107. And little Ian Clark, who was about Cole's age as well, 6 or 7, he's at the wall leaning on a cabinet, and he's looking up at the picture of his mom.
Yeah.
And he's saying, "Mom, I asked you not to go. Why did you go?" And I squatted down, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Hey, there are some things in life that happen that we simply can't understand." I said, and, I'm playing all this off the cuff, right?
Right.
And I said, when I was a kid, I never understood how that Santa Claus, that big fat guy, could get down a chimney and put all those presents around a tree and then go up through the chimney to go to the next house. I said, I never understood that. And maybe this is one of those times where we don't understand what's going on. And he didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me, right? His gaze stayed right at his mom. And about that time, I was told we had to go around to crew quarters. Is a bunch of apartment, little hotel rooms, basically. And we had to go around to all the rooms and begin to gather
everyone's
the
things.
crew's stuff, right? Yeah. Because they pack for an emergency. They pack if we had to land in Africa, they pack an Africa bag. If they were going to potentially land in California, they pack a California bag. They pack a Florida bag in case they return back to the launch site, right? They pack an end of mission bag, all that sort of stuff. And they all have their labels on it. And I started to go into the rooms of my families. And, of course, you know, Lonnie McCool's in there looking at Willie's stuff. And, you know, when you have to tell a spouse that, hey, I need that. I need to take that because we have to load it on the plane. And that was the next part. We loaded everybody up on NASA's jets. They had two business jets that we were going to fly back to Houston in.
And that would have been with everyone anyway. I mean,
Right.
those jets are always waiting when
Right.
a crew lands.
And they were at the skid strip facility, which is nearby to the Cape. And we loaded everything in the vans, and we drove everybody over, and we loaded up those planes, and it was very quiet. Everything was so quiet, no one talking about anything. And then we flew home, and that plane ride was the quietest, longest plane ride I'd ever been on. You know,
I can't imagine the pain.
well, you could sense it just by looking at the people, you know, and the hugs, you know, little Ian and his dad John with his arm around him. At least the husbands had each other. It was just...
I can't imagine the loneliness, though, even though all of them were going through it at the same time.
It was wicked bad. And then we land in Houston at Ellington. There's a huge crowd there. Our first job was to get off the plane and transport their gear to the vehicles that were taking them back to their homes. And we wanted to do that as quickly as possible because we wanted to get them away from the press. We wanted to get them home in a place that was comfortable or more comfortable to them, where they could then be back with their extended family and start to deal with this. And I remember Randy Stone was there, and at the time he was my former boss.
Right, and he was deputy director of the center at the time.
Yep, and he was waiting, and he saw me coming, and he looked at me, and he put his hand out, and
then he grabbed you. Yeah. Randy, too, a very faithful person who we lost all too soon. But he also had a big hand in you becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah.
So now I have to deal with my family, and I find out we're going to have an all-hands meeting. All the astronauts have to show back up at NASA to talk about this.
And this is late afternoon on that Saturday,
On
February
Saturday.
1st.
Yep. And so we go do that, and of course we're told by the bosses, don't say anything. You're not smart enough, Mr. Astronaut, to be able to converse with the press, and which really pissed me off because I needed to talk to someone.
Yep.
And I'm smart enough to know that, because there were rumors that with the Israeli astronaut on board that it was terrorist activity.
Well, that came out right away, as
all
I
that
recall.
kind of stuff.
In fact, that was one of the first things that probably I thought about, because the neighbors came over, rang the doorbell, and said, "What can we do?" Because everybody in the nation was watching.
Yeah.
Or by 10 o'clock in the morning, everybody knew what had happened and was watching it. And the neighbors came and said, "What do you think it is? Do you think it was a terrorist attack?"
Right.
And what can we do to help you? And my big thing was keep the press away, because the press was going to start looking for spouses of astronauts
for anyone
to speak.
Talk,
yeah. And how do you even deal with a response? And so, fortunately for me, we had a couple of phone calls, and other than that, we didn't have anyone show up at the house that I'm aware of, unless the neighbors scared them away or whatever.
I don't remember, but I do know that, I wanted to be trusted to say the right thing.
Sure.
That I wouldn't speculate on something I didn't know about. So when the meeting's finally over, I hop in my car and I drove home, and I get stopped by the police in Clear Lake Shores.
I forgot about that.
Because I was speeding. And I pull over. I'm in my big red pickup truck, and I roll down the window, and the guy says, "Do you have ID?" And I give him my ID, and he says, "You're speeding." And I said, "Look, I'm an astronaut, and we just talked about the Columbia that happened today." And he goes, "Well, do you have proof that you're an astronaut?" And of course, back then,
Are you in your blue suit at this time?
No.
Oh, you'd already changed.
But we had astronauts have no astronaut ID that says the word astronaut on it. So I showed him my NASA badge, and he backed off, and he let me off with a warning. And then I came home, and that's when I walked in the back door, and I saw you standing there, and Cole was wrapped around your leg. Mm-hmm. And what I recall is that he looked at me, and he said, "Daddy, did they die?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Yeah, Cole, they died." And he said, "Did they have children?" And I said, "Yes, a lot of them had children." And he said, "Did I know those children?" And I said, "Yes, you knew some of them." And he looked at me, and he walked away.
Isn't that funny? Because he'd asked me those questions earlier in the morning, and he wanted confirmation that what he'd been hearing all day was true, and the only way he had a confirmation on that was to hear it directly from you.
Yeah. And, I know that night when we went to bed that, I said, I need to be in church tomorrow. I just needed that. And when we went to church, we went to Sunday school first, and of course everybody in the church knew. And I was sitting there, and I wasn't doing too well.
Right.
And the support that we got from our church friends was amazing. And they said that they were glad that I was there because they couldn't think of anyone
that could be there and hold their hand. And if God put you in that place at that time, as painful as it was for you, God had you there to hold their hands.
And the pastor, Woody Berry, he changed his whole sermon, and he talked about what happened and how to help us deal with it. And I remember we were sitting kind of back to the middle, and he said something, and I just lost it, and I just started to sob. And part of me was embarrassed, and part of me was,
though that's why Rick Husband and the rest of the crew chose you, was God stepped in and said, "This is the right person for your family." Not that God knew what was happening necessarily, although I think he does. He knew you were the right person for that crew.
But that's what's funny. I never knew why they picked me. So, they never said, "Hey, we want you," because they just said, "We want you." But I know that there were reporters at church that day.
Oh, yes.
And they were creeping around trying to find somebody. And then, of course, they figured out who I was.
Yes.
And, they asked me some questions, and I gave them pretty basic answers. And, we can't speculate about what happened. And,
that was a difficult time, too.
Yeah, then it just became us coping with the situation. And, and then as part of the astronaut corps, I was a CACO, a Crew Assistance Casualty Officer, which is another military term. And I was asked to help with Doug Brown's mom and dad, but they were going to return to Virginia. So that responsibility got transferred to Leland Melvin, who was working at headquarters and living in Virginia.
Right.
And I always felt, and I know this is probably wrong, but I've always felt that I didn't do enough. That
you wanted to be able to provide more assistance. You wanted to be more included in all the things happening post-event.
And I felt like I didn't do that, but that's something I've had to live with ever since.
Yeah, it's tough when you want to be involved, and in some cases the best thing is for you not to be involved, and in some cases it's the right thing, and you didn't get to choose. So Well, let's see what we can do to spin this a little bit and
Change the tone a bit.
yeah, I think your folks would enjoy hearing some fun stuff for a while.
Well, I, after all this happened, everything stopped for a while. And so I wasn't going to be traveling to Russia for a period of time.
Well, and you weren't really traveling at that time either, right?
Not much. I think we were prepping to. We did Nemo.
You did Nemo. You hadn't gone to Russia yet because Russia came a year later. It came. You went the first time in January the following year.
Yeah. And that was good because now I was assigned. Now I was focused. They had figured out what had happened with Columbia. We were on the road to relaunching again.
Right, and you finally got an assignment.
And I had an assignment, and I was traveling back and forth to Star City, about 45 miles or 45 minutes northeast of Moscow. I don't remember much about preparation. I know that we...
I think we might have talked about that previously, where you started storing stuff around the bedroom and worrying about what food you were going to be able to eat and thinking you were going to starve to death while you were in Moscow and Star City because you didn't know what
toilet paper. Always taking toilet paper because I'd heard the stories that the only thing NASA documents were good for in Russia was to go in the box right by the crapper. And that if you're going to use one of those NASA document pages, you had to crumple it up about 1,000 times to make it as soft as possible. I never did that. I never had to do that because I
always took tissue.
Toilet paper with me. Yeah. But we bought winter clothes.
Oh yeah, we went. Did we
go to Reno? We went to Reno for some
and we went to an REI store and
because we had a friend that worked at REI and we were going to get a discount from REI, and so we spent a couple hours in the REI store.
Was that Bryn's mom?
Yeah,
Bryn Sutton.
Yep, her mom.
Yeah,
and trying to figure out what I would need because I lived in Houston, so I hadn't worn winter clothing since I left Nebraska or Iowa State, and now I had to buy all this new stuff so I wouldn't freeze my booty off in Star City. And
of course you were going to be going in January, which was like the coldest month of the year.
And I'm so glad that we had that REI gear to go because I remember I had landed in Moscow. The Russian guy picks you up in a van, and he doesn't speak any English, and my Russian wasn't that great yet. And we drove out to Star City, and the first thing I saw as we go deeper into the suburbia, I guess, and it's a way different suburbia, right? It's like you're going out and back in time.
Right.
And as we cross this intersection, the driver of the van, he starts cussing in Russian, and he stops, and there's a dead body laying in the middle of the road.
Are you kidding?
No, because there's a cop standing by the dead and the
kids.
And I have no idea what happened, and we stopped for a second, and I'm thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And he pulls out and he drives around this dead body, and we go to Star City. It's freezing freaking cold. There's snow everywhere. It seemed like it was 8 feet high.
And you hadn't stopped for food or anything, had you?
I don't remember.
Because the shopping there, you'll have to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, but I ended up at my cottage at night, and it was Sunday. Because the next morning was going to be my first day of training at Star City. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to bed, and of course I'm jet lagged, and I took a sleeping pill, and I'm sleeping like a rock when I hear this on my door, and it's Jeff Williams, my cottage mate, and he's waking me up.
Saying it's time to go.
It's time to go, and it's freaking dark outside.
Yeah, it's dark there a lot.
I know, and I wake up and I'm groggy and I don't know what I'm doing. He says, "Hey, get ready. We gotta go meet the Russian contingent of bigwigs and yada yada yada." And I had no idea this was going on, but he did. And so I get dressed and he drags me over to the territory, which is about a 10-minute walk, and puts me in front of all these Russian guys in military uniforms, right, who are welcoming me to Star City. And that was how my training started. To become an astronaut flying on the International Space Station.
Crazy.
And the first set of classes that I took, I had a translator because my Russian wasn't that good. And I remember we were studying each module of the Russian segment of the space station, so the service module and the functional cargo block. And one of my first classes was a guy telling me why the service module was composed of a cylinder, a cone, and a sphere. And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of interesting, but why do we care? But you can't say that as an astronaut. You can't be that guy that questions the teachers at Star City, because others had questioned those guys, and then the unwritten rule was, if you mouth off to them or you tell them how smart you are, because some guys had said, hey, I understand this, I'm a physicist, or I understand this, I don't need to study this, they would put a mark by your name and you would be on a list.
I'm sure there were a few folks on the list.
And everybody said that our cottages were bugged and you had to be careful what you said.
Well, they'd said that for years. I mean, this is, 04 when you're over there. And, yeah, they'd been saying that since 92 or 3 when we first started relationship.
And so this whole thing went on, right, for weeks at a time. 4 weeks in Russia, 4 weeks at home, 4 weeks in Russia, 4 weeks at home.
So let me tell them a little bit about
what... It made me a crabby dad, didn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so the Christmas before you left, so that was January of 04. So Christmas of 03, you wanted to do something special for me. And I had already decided it was going to be puppy year. And so I was getting a dachshund for Cole for Christmas that year. And you and Cole decided that I needed something. And that ended up being a baby bird, an African gray parrot.
Yes, that you said you had wanted, as long as we dated, you said I always wanted an African gray parrot.
But timing was really not great because I had a kid in diapers. I had a 6-year-old. I had the puppy. I got a baby bird, and we had our house on the market.
Yeah.
And so I had to keep the house clean every day I left. So I'm packing the kids up every day to take them to school and take care.
Well, that's on you. You didn't have to, but...
The house is on the market, so you have to have everything cleaned up and wiped down and things put away. And you were gone 12 weeks.
Yeah.
You were gone.
No, I was gone. So the first 12 weeks of training was 4 weeks in Russia.
Right.
Then I flew home for 1 week.
Right.
Then I got on a plane and went to Canada for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And then I flew home for a week. And then I was back in Russia for 4 more weeks. So the first 12 weeks I trained, I was only with my family for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I didn't like it either.
But imagine all these other things that I was doing.
I know.
Let alone you being gone and that just being, but then
I told you that you're amazing lately?
A baby bird, a puppy, a kid in diapers, and a house on the market. That was a great time. That was a great time.
But we still have Astro, the African gray.
We do. He's going to live forever.
Who speaks Russian,
a little bit,
English, and I think maybe a swear word or two.
He used to say "Go Big Red," but he doesn't say that anymore.
No, well, they haven't earned it back yet. Once they earn it back, we'll bring back "Go Big Red."
Okay.
Huskers rule. Huskers rule. Go Big Red. Huskers rule. Oh my God. So, how was I as a father and a spouse during this 3.5 years or whatever it was that I was traveling back and forth around the world?
I would say
nice. Be nice.
I'll try. It was harder than you being gone.
Oh, did I mention we've been married
station.
for 28 years?
Yes.
Did I mention that? Yeah. Okay, sorry, honey. Go.
So I found the 4.5 years of training, and there was a delay because when we returned to flight, we had more foam fall off of the vehicle, which was part of the problem that happened to Columbia. And so STS-114 had a return to flight, and more foam fell off, so we delayed launches again for another year. So your training ended up being longer than anticipated.
Right. Right.
So that time was home a month, gone a month, home a month, gone a month, and our routine with the kids needed to remain the same as much as possible. But when you were home, you always wanted to be involved in what we were doing. But you still had your responsibilities to training and work. And even though you wanted to be involved in what the kids were up to and engaged in that, you also were focusing on the training that you had and prepping for your next trip to be gone.
Right.
So that made it harder, much harder than when you spent 152 days in space.
Oh, I believe it.
Because once you were gone, you were gone.
Right.
And you know, as a family, the agency doesn't really think about those years prior to launch. They give you some attention.
We got some briefings.
Yeah.
We got some psych briefings that said, "Hey,
this is going to happen.
Don't count on anybody but yourself. You're not going to get much help." Oh, that's comforting.
Yeah. So, you know, I found that was more difficult, and you know, we made some mistakes. We probably should have stayed in our house in South Shore for that period, because the neighbors were more known. They knew the family and they appreciated us. And when we moved into this new house, you know, just a year before you flew, not even a year, it was about 10 months before you flew. It was a brand new neighborhood.
Right.
We didn't know anybody. The kids didn't really know people. And so that support system wasn't there. And so that, you know, there were difficulties, definitely difficulties. And your question was, how did you behave? Well, how did I behave? You know, it was a hard time for all of us. And it was hard for the kids. I think there was a little stress there. And you know, I tried to entertain the kids with Wednesday nights Mexican food. And, you know, we would, you know, have phone calls and so forth. The kids, they didn't really enjoy phone calls from Russia.
No.
It just wasn't interesting for them. They'd rather just wait till you were home to spend time with you. On nights when you would come home for the first time in a month, we would do steak night.
Right.
So we'd sit around the kitchen table and we'd have steaks and enjoy each other's company, and the kids would hang on you.
I tried to stay awake till 11 or 11:30.
So that you could adjust.
So I could go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember it was really hard for me when I was in Russia. You know, I was told that my computer in Russia in the cottage would be exactly the same as the one on my desk back at NASA. And so I had purchased a video camera that, you know, plugged into the computer so I could see the kids and we could do video conferences. Well, it took us several tries over weeks before we figured out that the Russians had blocked the ports in the system somehow that would not allow the video to go through. So for a long time, our calls weren't video.
Right.
And I remember,
and this is also early on in technology.
Yes.
When you think about it. You're talking 04, 05, 06.
Yeah, and I was listening to the other astronauts. You need to buy this camera and you need to do this. And I remember when I finally got to watch Cole one time, he was up in the study, sitting at the desk, and all he was doing was spinning around in the chair while I was trying to talk to him, and he was just spinning around. So I knew it was easy to tell that, well, this is not going well. But it was better for me probably than it was for the kids.
For sure.
And it did help a lot that I could
Sutton
talk.
was pretty young, so she didn't really – there wasn't a whole lot of interest in there.
No.
Yeah.
No. So as we moved forward into the training flow and it began to get more real, how did things change?
Yeah, well,
or did they?
Yeah, I don't know that they really changed a whole lot. You were engaged, you were focused, and it was what it was. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't fantastic. It was what it was. It was what we were living through. And you know, I can remember people ask, "What's it like to be married to an astronaut?" Well, I don't know anything different. And kids would, the kids would get asked basically the same question. What's it like your dad being an astronaut? I don't know anything different. So I don't know that it did change a whole lot. I mean, we just dealt with what we had in front of us, and we knew eventually you'd fly, and we'd move to the next step, whatever that next step was. And one thing that I did was I cut back on my hours. I went to part-time because there was just working full-time and knowing that I had, all the responsibilities of, child care and home care and everything. Oh, and that dog and that bird. And those kinds
and
of
I
things.
appreciate that very much. Did I say I loved you today?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a lot different than maybe other people were living through, but that was our life. That's
Right.
what we chose. I know when I married you, or I knew when I married you, that you were either going to be an NC2A Division I basketball referee, an NBA basketball referee, or an astronaut. Those were your three things that you wanted to do. So I knew that I had a life in front of me that I needed to be an independent woman. So we made that happen. And, we chose to focus on you, and I focused on the family, and then we got to celebrate the first launch.
Well, and before we went through the launch process, we took the kids to a launch prior.
Yes.
To make sure that, well, maybe, I don't know if we could make sure of anything, but to expose them to the situation, right? Sunny Williams, who was I was her backup for
Right.
most of my training flow, because she was going to fly on the space station with Expedition 14.
Right.
Or whatever the numbers were back then. They kept changing a lot, but I was always her backup. She was on Expedition 12, then moved to 13, then she was finalized to 14.
Right.
I was finalized to 15. I backed her up. I traveled with her to Russia. We did winter survival training in the winter of Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School in Wyoming. That was not fun. But knowing when her launch was now go, it was a great opportunity for us to expose the kids to the process.
Yeah. So it was like December of 06.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to Florida. STS 116, I think, is what
Right.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just going to be a crew family.
Just
that was
watching. Right.
And so they put us on regular buses with all the other visitors and that sort of thing. But I think, yeah, is that what happened?
I'm pretty sure.
I've been so lucky to see so many launches that
I didn't get we didn't get any special treatment except that we were allowed to be.
I think we got to drive our own vehicle out to Banana Creek, because I don't remember anybody being around when Sutton was yelling.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think you're right.
So somehow we got to be able to go out to Banana Creek, which is the viewing site for the majority of people who go and watch a launch. Mm-hmm. There's other places that you can view from, but that's kind of the closest,
and we got
coolest
to sit
spot.
with the families. We were in the families and the NASA astronaut groups. Now,
right, but
the
it wasn't
VIPs
necessarily
were next to us.
Yeah, but
the
crew families of the people on board weren't necessarily with us.
No, they were they were either on the Launch Control Center roof. I don't think they were at the Banana Creek.
We hadn't moved to that location yet.
So, but their extended families were there.
Right.
There were astronauts hanging out, that come for the launch and do whatever jobs they do.
I want to say Stephanie spoke that time.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Stephanie
Wilson was who ended up being a crew member of yours. So we went, and it was nighttime. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. And
it was chilly.
Yeah, it was December in Florida, so I mean, not like here in Omaha, but
yeah, true.
But for Florida, it was a little chilly, and the vehicle launched, and it was pretty exciting because it was nighttime, so the glow was really fascinating, and we got to experience that with one of your missions as well. But anyway, once it was over, the wind direction was such that they needed to clear the viewing area pretty quickly after launch, which normally they let you hang out. You can go inside the Saturn V building. You can do a little shopping. You can chat with people and go through the whole, oh, that was so great. Well, we didn't get to do that because the wind direction was blowing the acid rain back toward the viewing site.
And that's because the solid rocket motors have the solid part of it is aluminum perchlorate, and when it burns, it makes acid rain, and it always makes acid rain, but it depends on the wind direction as to where it's going to land, and if it's the wind puts it back on the people, they whisk you out as fast as possible.
Right. And there wasn't really like huge danger, but they definitely wanted to protect us, so they wanted us to get all the way back in our vehicles as quickly as possible, and we were some of the last to get in our vehicle, and some of the buses were waiting on us because we had like an SUV that our family was in. And that's when Sutton started crying and screaming, and but she was little.
Yeah, and she loved Sonny.
Yeah, she loved Sonny, but
Yep.
I don't. What I remember was she kept saying, "It's Sonny, I'm gonna miss Sonny," and I finally figured out that it really wasn't that.
Sonny, yeah,
It was
yeah.
just that all the emotion and the loud noise and the bright light, and I'm really glad that we took the kids, because I would have had to have dealt with that when you launched. And now at least they'd been through some of that and understood it was going to be loud and it was going to be kind of scary and bright and shiny and people pushing you everywhere. And so at least we went through that with her first.
Well, and we finally got back to the condo. I remember this very clearly, that I told her all the way back, we're going to send an email to Sonny. And we got back, and Sonny wouldn't get it for a few days, but I had access to her space station email account.
Right.
So Sutton and I composed an email, and we told Sonny that we loved her, and it was beautiful, and la la la. And we hit the send button, and I said, it's going to go to Sonny. She's going to read it, and everything will be cool, and she'll send you an email back. And that calmed her down a lot, and she did get an email back from Sonny a few days later. So
I wonder if she remembers that.
I don't know. We'll have to ask her.
She was pretty small.
Yeah, she was only 2, right?
No.
Or was she?
When you launched, she was almost 6.
Oh, she was almost 6, so she's probably 5-ish.
Yeah, she was 5 when we watched that, because she was 6 when you launched, because she had a birthday between the 2 missions.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Something else.
So then we moved forward. That was a good exercise to do as a family.
Yeah, we got to go to Disney.
Because I was next. Yeah. And we have an interesting launch story just based on the fact that I had been assigned originally to STS-118.
Yes.
And STS-118 was scheduled to launch in August of 2007 to the International Space Station with me on board.
Right, and you had been training with that crew for not just the Russian piece was independent of the training with the STS-118 crew. So we'd gotten to know those families.
We had a patch
yes,
with my name on it.
Yes, you did.
That was very exciting.
Yep.
And
and you had a great group of people that you were crewing with, and you were going to do spacewalks with some folks on that particular assignment. So we'd spent 18 months, I think, at that time, maybe not quite that much, as crew family, right? Everybody on 118. And then 117, which was supposed to go after 116. So 116 flew in December. 117 was supposed to fly in February, I think.
Right.
And there were 6 guys on board.
Right.
And there was some freak hailstorm on the
Cape.
pad.
Mm-hmm.
On the pad. It wasn't even the whole Cape. It was just like there where the shuttle was ready to launch. And it was the week of launch. And it gets hit by hail. And the external tank had pockmarks all over it from the hail. So all of a sudden, STS-117 has to be repaired. And it gets
pulled
delayed.
back to the vehicle assembly
Right.
building, the huge building at the Cape.
So everybody who'd been in Florida for that launch goes home, including the crew, everybody.
Exactly.
And things change.
That's when our lives changed.
Yeah.
Please rate, review, follow, and subscribe, as it helps others find my podcast. Thank you for listening. And a special thank you to my dear friend Chip Davis of Mannheim Steamroller fame for the use of his talents and music.